Today, we're digging into a really powerful message called Dilexi. Now, it might be a recent document, but its roots, they go back 2,000 years, deep into the story of the Christian faith's commitment to the poor. And this isn't just about charity, it's really about a foundational love story. Okay, so let's start with the title itself. Dilexia te, it's Latin for I have loved you. And the document kicks off with this incredible line from the book of Revelation. This sets the entire tone. It's a direct, personal message of love, spoken right to those who feel marginalized, who feel like they have no power in the world.
So, you might be wondering, why is this commitment so absolutely central to the faith? Well, we're going to break it down into three simple parts. The why, which is the theological heart of it all, the how, looking at its history and action, and finally, the what all this means for the church today.
All right, so first up, the why. What's the real engine behind this 2,000-year-long focus? Well, it all starts with a core belief, a theological principle that really shapes everything else. And that principle is called the preferential option for the poor. Now, that word preferential can kind of throw you off. It doesn't mean exclusive, like God only loves the poor. The idea is that God's love is for everybody, but it shines with this special intensity on those who are most vulnerable, the ones the world tends to forget. It's about seeing the world through their eyes. And you see this idea perfectly embodied in the life of Jesus. I mean, his whole story is just soaked in this reality. He was born in the most humble way possible, lived as a traveling teacher with no real home, and what's the first thing he does when he starts his public mission? He announces he's here to bring good news to the poor. So this wasn't just a part of his message, it was who he was. And then you get this quote from the Gospel of Matthew, and wow, this is a total game changer. It completely reframes what charity is. Suddenly, it's not just a nice thing to do, the powerful helping the powerless. It becomes a direct, personal encounter with God. Helping someone in need is literally serving God himself. So, if that's the theological why, how did it translate into a historical how? I mean, was this just a nice idea, or did people actually live this out? Well, the answer is a consistent and frankly, kind of staggering history of action that spans centuries. Just look at this timeline. For almost 2 millennia, this idea just echoes through history. You've got St. Lawrence in the 3rd century, who, when asked for the church's treasures, brings forth the poor and says, "These are the treasures." Fast forward, and St. John Chrysostom is preaching that if you have extra and you don't share it, you're basically stealing. This golden thread runs all the way through history, from St. Benedict to St. Francis, right up to St. Teresa of Calcutta. This was never a side project. It was the main event.
And this commitment took on very real, very practical forms. For example, they cared for the sick. Long before we had public healthcare, people like St. John of God and St. Camillus de Lellis were building the very first hospitals, creating places of healing specifically for people who had no money and nowhere else to go. And it didn't stop there. They worked to liberate the captive. Think about the Middle Ages. There were entire religious orders founded for one single, incredibly dangerous purpose: to go and ransom Christians who had been captured and sold into slavery. And they educated the young. Pioneers like St. John Bosco realized that poverty is a trap, a cycle, and one of the best ways to break it is with education. So they founded some of the first free schools in Europe, built specifically for poor and working-class kids who otherwise had no chance at all. Okay, so all of this, the deep theology, the centuries of action, what does it all add up to? How does it define the church today? Well, a really pivotal moment in the 20th century helped bring it all into focus. The year is 1962. The Catholic Church is kicking off one of the biggest events in its modern history, the Second Vatican Council. And the Pope at the time, John XXIII, he sets the tone with this incredible vision. He declared that the church wanted to be, above all else, the church of the poor. Now, as we've seen, that wasn't a brand new idea. But saying it so clearly, so forcefully, right at the start of the council, that put this identity right at the very heart of the church's modern mission. And what this does is it creates this really stark contrast. On one side, you have a kind of worldly model, focused on power, on wealth, on looking good. But the model that was put forward at the council, the Church of the Poor, it just flips that whole thing on its head. The focus shifts to service, to sharing, to standing with the marginalized, into a kind of radical simplicity. So you might be thinking, okay, great history lesson, but this isn't just about the past. The whole point of the document Dilexi is that this 2,000-year-old story is a living, breathing, and unending challenge for us today, right now.
And to make that challenge feel timeless, the document points back to an ancient story, the parable of the Good Samaritan. You know the one, the guy who stops to help a wounded stranger on the side of the road when everyone else just walks right by. That guy, he's held up as the definitive model. That's the blueprint for action. And that leaves all of us with a final, really pointed question. If that ancient story is the timeless model, if that's the example we're supposed to follow, then the challenge for every single one of us in every generation is to answer this: who is our neighbor lying on the side of the road today?